everyone. So this is the continuation of our report regarding on the survey of poetry authors and their unique styles of writing. So we have here John Keats. So he was an English poet of the second generation of Romantic poets with Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley. So his poems had been in publication for less than 4 years when he died of tuberculosis at the age of 25. So his writing style is consisted of the use of imagery, personification, metaphors, and alliteration. So the imagery that he uses appeals to the senses of sight, touch, taste, hearing, and smell. So we have here his one of the famous works entitled La Belle Dame or Dame Sans Merci. It denotes to the reader a sensory experience that invites the reader to fully place themselves in the mind of the speaker. So while John Keats primarily offered a visual image of the poem, the reader is also about to take part in feeling, smell, and thought. Keats has a magnificent way of making the reader feel many things at once. So at one moment, the flow puts the reader into a dreamlike story, while at the same time, the diction and syntax take the poem into a headlong mourn. So in the poem of John Keats, we can see there Knight at Arms. So with this description of the knight, Keats is inviting the reader to recognize the nobility of the gentleman in the poem. So at arms describes him in his full knight's armor and perhaps ready for battle. And it represents the knight as someone who is untouchable. We also have here the flowering metaphor in the third stanza. So the gentleman is described as the fading and withering of flowers. So flowers are oftentimes an image of delicate feelings or delicate softness and feminist qualities. So the fact that the knight is experiencing these emotions let us know that under the brave exterior of the armor, the knight is just a human being like everyone else. So he is capable of heartbreak and anguish. So while the flowers are usually presenting a beautiful image, their withering is contrasted with the expected image by way of sharp diction that plants the unpleasant picture of the knight's physical suffering. So that is the unique styles of writing by John Keats. So next writer, we also have here Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe's writing style is Gothic and his genre is horror and suspense. So Poe's writing style is characterized by the use of Gothic and horror elements. When we say Gothic, it is a writing style that combines dark elements, spooky settings, conflicted and disturbed characters into a whimsically horrific, often romantic story. So Gothic writing style is all about horror or scary stories. So Edgar Allan Poe has this kind of writing style. One of Edgar Allan Poe's story or famous work is The Telltale Heart. So in the story, Poe creates a creepy, scary mood through the narrator's denial of madness. So the description of the old man's eye and the repetition of certain words throughout this story is the scary mood of his famous work. In the Telltale Heart story of Edgar Allan Poe, it is related by an unnamed narrator who endeavors to convince the reader of the narrator's sanity while simultaneously describing a murder the narrator created. We also have his poem entitled The Raven. In creating his poem, he uses symbolism, imagery, and alliteration. So let us observe how he wrote his poem entitled The Raven. So The Raven is one of his famous work. It is one of his famous poems. His poem entitled The Raven is all about how grief can overcome a person's ability to live in the present and engage with the society. At the beginning, the speaker describes himself as weak and weary, suggesting that his attempts to distract himself from Lenore's memory by reading has only exhausted him, though the speaker tries to convince himself that he should forget his grief. The raven's refrain takes him back to the reality of his loss, again taking him out of the present moment. So when he tells that the raven leave his loneliness unbroken, he is emphasizing that his grief has caused him to shut himself off from the world. But paradoxically, he's not truly alone because the memory of Lenore keeps him company. Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven is a poem centered around an unnamed narrator's journey into madness after realizing he will never forget his lost Lenore. So he uses symbols such as a talking raven. Lenore here is a character thought to be a deceased wife. So she may represent idealized love, beauty, truth, or hope in a better world. She is rare and radiant, so Lenore also symbolizes the own deceased wife Virginia of Edgar Allan Poe. So that is all about the unique styles of John Keats and Edgar Allan Poe.
So next, let's move on to the next style of writing poetry. Next, here is the Villanelle. So I know some of you encounter this style of writing for the very first time. So Villanelle is another very old form of poetry that came from France and has lots of rules. It is made up of 19 lines, 5 stanzas of 3 lines, each and a final stanza of 4 lines. So take note here that the Villanelle there is a lot of repetition lines in here in every stanza. So the rhyme scheme here is ABA, 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 ABAA. So you will notice here that there's a lot of repetition of lines in every stanza. So let's move to the writers under Villanelle. First is Dylan Marlais Thomas. So he was a Welsh poet and a writer whose works include the poems Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night as one of his best known works, and Death Shall Have No Dominion, as well as the play for voices Under Milkwood. So he also wrote stories and radio broadcasts such as A Child's Christmas in Wales and Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog. He became widely popular in his lifetime and remained so after his death at the age of 39 in New York City. But then he had acquired a reputation which he had encouraged as a roistering, drunken, and doomed poet. So Thomas was always a highly individual stylist. Sound was as important as sense in his poems. Some would even say more important. So in his writing style, he made ample that use of alliteration, assonance, internal rhyme, and approximate rhyme. So that is Dylan's unique styles of writing a poem. So let's go to his work, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. So you have noticed here the example. There's a line here that is repeated in every line. So the rage against the dying of the light. This line was stated in the 4th line. It was stated again in the 5th and the last line. So that is the Villanelle. So next author is Edward Arlington Robinson. So he was born on December 22, 1869 in Head Tide, Maine. Although he was one of the most prolific American poets of the early 20th century, and his collected poems won the first Pulitzer Prize ever awarded to poetry, and he is remembered now for a few short poems. So he was devoted to his art and led a solitary, so he existed alone and often makeshift existence. He published virtually nothing during his long career except poetry. So Robinson is one of the America's greatest writers and experimented with difficult French forms. So his unique styles of writing is in his work is written almost exclusively in a blank verse. So his unique style is almost exclusively in a blank verse. So a blank verse is a literary term that refers to poetry written in unrhymed but metered lines, almost iambic pentameter. So that is Edward's unique styles of writing a poem. So let's move on to the another styles of writing poetry. It is the limerick. So limerick is a funny poems which were made popular by Edward Lear in the 19th century. So it is a 5-line poem that consists of a single stanza, an AABBA rhyme scheme, and whose subject is a short pithy tale or description. So in limerick, you can see the funny or the punchline on always in the last line of the poem. So let's go to the authors of limerick. So first is Edward Lear. So he is most widely recognized as the father of the limerick form of a poetry and is well known for his nonsense poems. So he is an artist illustrator, musician, author, and a poet who is known mostly for his literary nonsense in poetry and prose, and especially his limericks, a form he popularized. So his principal areas of work of an artist were threefold: as a draughtsman. So draughtsman means a person who is drawing a plan or sketch, employed to make illustrations of birds and animals, making color drawings during his journeys, which he reworked later, sometimes as plates for his travel books, and as a minor illustrator of Alfred Lord Tennyson's. So Alfred Lord Tennyson's is one of the English poets. So as an author, he is known principally for his popular nonsense collection of poems, songs, short stories, botanical drawings, receipts, and alphabets. He also composed and published 12 musical settings of Tennyson's poetry. So specifically, he is widely known as a writer with a style of an original kind of nonsense verse and as the popularizer of limerick. So take note that Edward Lear's unique style of writing is kind of a nonsense verse. So next author is Joseph Rudyard Kipling. So he was born on December 30, 1865 in Mumbai, India to a British family. So when he was 5 years old, he was taken to England to begin his education, where he suffered deep feelings of abandonment and confusion after living a pampered lifestyle as a colonial. So he suffered a discouragement and anxiety, so he returned to India at the age of 17 to work as a journalist and editor for the Civil and Military Gazette in Lahore. So Kipling published his first collection of verse, Departmental Ditties and Other Verses, in 1886 in his first collection of stories, Plain Tales from the Hills, in 1888. So Kipling writing styles are patriotic. So patriotic means expressing a devotion. Next, by autobiographical and encouraging, which is known throughout his short stories. So that is the unique style of writing of Jose Rudyard Kipling.
Once again, good morning, and I am about to continue our reporting, which is the Ode. So this is the oldest form of poetry and believed to have come from ancient Greece. So usually this was an originally played with to sing or chant. So it was originally performed with a musical instrument, An ode is typically written to praise a person, event, or thing, and they are usually quite short in length. So, odes often consist of stanzas of 10 lines each. So, we have here one of our famous author, which is John Keats in 1819. So, he wrote many kinds of poem regarding to this ode. So we just had some example, just like the ode to a nightingale. So you can also see or read into the slide. So John Keats described this poem as thoughts about the conflicted nature of the human life, and he also he tries to examine the connection between pain and joy, life and death. So we also have here the ode on Gratian Orne. So this one is one of the great odes. So it is also published in 1820, and it was written by the English Romantic poets. So the meaning also of this poem is it is an appreciation of beauty and innocence. So let's move on to the elegy. So what is elegy? Elegy is a song or poem expressing sorrow, especially for the one who is dead. So we had here one of the author, which is Alfred Tennyson. So he published his first solo collection of poems in 1830, which is the Claribel and Mariana, which remains some of Tennyson's most celebrated poems were included in this volume. And also, his longer works included an memoriam inspired by his grief over the untimely death of a friend and ideals of the king based on Arthurian legend. So we had here one of his works, which is the In Memoriam AHH. So AHH refers to the name of his friend, who is Arthur Henry Hallam. So the poem In Memoriam recounts poem Alfred Lord Tennyson's attempt to understand his grief over the loss of his friend Arthur. So Arthur died of cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 22 years in Vienna in 1833. So we also had here one of the author, Paul Celan. So Paul Celan, born in Romania to a German-speaking Jewish family. So in 1938, Celan went to Paris to study medicine, but returned to Romania before the outbreak of World War II. And we have here the one of the example of his work, the Death Fugue, which means suffering, death, inhumanity, surrealism, and authoritarianism. So let's move on to ballad. So ballad means tells a story of adventure, romance, or of a hero that is suitable for singing, and that usually has a stanza of 4 lines with a rhyme on the second and fourth line. So we have here Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So Coleridge coined many familiar words and praise, including suspension of this belief. And we also had here the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. So this is one of the longest poem that he wrote. So the meaning of the poem depicts a man desperate longing for forgiveness to the crimes he has committed along his trips. So we also had here William Butler Yeats. So in his later years, he served 2 terms as a senator of the Irish Free States. Yeats is one of the few writers whose greatest works were written after the award of the Nobel Prize, where he received the prize chiefly or his dramatic works. His significance today rests on his lyrical achievement. So we also had here one of the example, To the Rose Upon the Road of Time. So it was published in 1893. So the poem means to express the need to appreciate the past without seeking to recreate it, to appreciate immortal beauty and mortal. It is also wishes time to come to an end so that the human race can live a life of peace without being a worried.